Hello, and welcome back to another edition of Tech in 10, the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs postgame show. From the Ruston Daily Leader, I am sports editor Matt Bellinson, coming to you after Louisiana Tech's 23-14 win in the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl over the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. What a game! There's so many emotions watching a Louisiana Tech football game. It's never, I should say never, it's rarely just a sit back, kick your feet up, and just enjoy the ride type of game with Louisiana Tech. And frankly, I think it was just a fitting end to what this season has been. It's been a roller coaster. Highs have been really high, lows have been really low. But in the end, Louisiana Tech finishes the season 8-5, and they earn their first bowl victory since 2019. So a lot to get into. Obviously, this is going to be my last, episode as of now that I'm planning for to kind of close the chapter on the 2025 season. Obviously, only a couple days left in the 2025 calendar as well. So I'm going to kind of obviously start with just recapping the game, and then I'm going to kind of springboard and maybe look ahead a little bit as we move into 2026. So starting with the game, very sloppy. Obviously, if you watch this game, Louisiana Tech, probably one of the worst first halves I've seen them play, and I've seen them play a lot of first halves, a lot of football. It was just ugly. The run game was non-existent. Trey Kukuk in the passing game was really bad. Missed wide open receivers. It reminded me a lot of the LSU game, honestly. Just the offense just had no answers. It was really bad. The defense was giving up explosive plays in the pass game, and Louisiana Tech finds itself down 14-3 at the half, and you're thinking, okay, this is a hinge point. This is where, again, Louisiana Tech, as we've seen time and time again this year, they're at a pivot point where, do they fold and just give up and they just continue to let a team roll over them, or do they find a way? Do they believe in themselves? Do they adjust? And do they figure out ways to win football games? This honestly reminded me a little bit of the Liberty game. Not as severe of a deficit, obviously, but I just think in terms of a program that, again, I've covered this team. This is now my fourth season that I've covered at Louisiana Tech, and if you're a Louisiana Tech fan, you know this firsthand. There are so many examples in the Sonny Cumbie era where a Louisiana Tech team of old would have just laid down and just allowed Coastal Carolina to just pass all over the field and put up whatever they wanted. I watched this team in 2023 and, frankly, at times in 2024. This team just quit at times. This team, at times, would get down early or would just allow big leads to just balloon on them, and they just didn't really fight back. That has been the theme of the 2025 season. There's so many takeaways that I'll have from this year, but the biggest one I think I have is that Louisiana Tech never stopped fighting. Louisiana Tech was thrown so much adversity this year. I mean, you think about it, like in this game, Trey Kukuk, I know, is technically named the starting quarterback this year, and he starts the season as your quarterback. But let's be honest, like, he was benched for a reason. This offense found life under Blake Baker. Obviously, Blake tears his ACL. Then Evan's out for the year. Then Evan decides to transfer and opt out of this bowl game. So this offense was put on the shoulders of Trey Kukuk and Clay Thevenin and Amari Wiggins basically over the last month. And all you saw was that this offense just continued to plug away. It was ugly. It was really disgusting to watch at times. That first half, again, was just bad football. It was just bad execution. The passing game was one of the worst I've seen in Louisiana Tech since I've been here. But again, that being said, Louisiana Tech find ways to win. Again, you're down. You're basically your entire starting secondary. You get shredded in the first half, and you don't allow a single score in the second half. You force 6 punts, 3 takeaways. You block a field goal. It's just an example of what this Louisiana Tech season has been. This team just fights, no matter if they're down just due to injury, transfer, attrition, or just frankly just a lack of underperformance, for a majority of a game. They just find ways to come back and win. And I understand that if you're a Louisiana Tech fan, I could hear the complaints about how it should look better than this at this point. It's not aesthetically pleasing. I understand that, and I'm right there with you. It certainly is not clean football. It certainly is not eye-catching, pleasing football. Again, this program is probably going to finish the year top 3 nationally in penalty yardage. They came into this game top 5. They had, I think, 113 penalty yards in this game alone, so they're probably going to finish the year top 3. But, regardless, I think it's just another example that Louisiana Tech, it's at a point now in the Sonny Cumbie era where I don't know if necessarily the execution is where it needs to be overall, but they're finding ways to win. And again, I think we've spent so much in the early part of the Sonny Cumbie era talking about how they lose games like this more often than not. And really, like, you can point to obviously the Delaware game, this year, the Kennesaw State game. But really, like, this season, those games have really been the outliers, where in years past, those have been the norm. So I think that's my biggest takeaway from this bowl game here tonight was, yes, was it sloppy? Yes, did Louisiana Tech need a pretty amazing second half to pull out the victory? Yes, they did. But again, this team just fights all season. This team finds ways to win. They were just laying wood all. I mean, like the defensive secondary for as inexperienced as they really were outside of Jakari Foster and Cedric Woods tonight, making plays, laying big hits. They were getting pressure on Ty Hudson, Coastal's quarterback, pretty much all that second half. It was just a really great defensive masterclass that I think for a unit that I think again is just criminally underrated as nationally. I think obviously we know what they do as far as taking away the football, and they certainly did that in the second half, but there are so many times this year where this Louisiana Tech defense just puts their foot down and refuses to cave in and basically just says, if this offense can just give us anything resembling competency, we can win games. You saw that here in that second half. I mean, again, they just completely shut down Coastal's pass attack. They completely shut down Coastal's ability to control the line of scrimmage, and they win the game. And so I think that's just my biggest takeaway for the bowl game itself. Obviously, Trey Kukuk had a good second half, made the plays when he needed to. I certainly feel like going into the offseason, I don't know if necessarily you need to find another quarterback or you need to work extremely hard on his passing game. I understand that this is a run-first offense, but you cannot win consistently in 2025, 2026 college football if your quarterback can't complete 10-yard passes. And so I think it's a huge area of emphasis for this offense. That being said, I really feel like over the last month, you really saw this run game become the identity of this team, and you saw that in the second half. Trey Kukuk, huge runs. Clay Theven had a couple runs. Obviously, Andrew Burnett and the Wildcat, this program really found something with him, especially at the goal line. And so I think it's just a season that was encapsulated in this bowl game in all areas. They were sloppy. They didn't execute. They dug themselves a hole, and they dug out of it, and they found ways to win that game. So I think overall, I think it's just it's a welcome sign for Louisiana Tech fan base that's been starving for a winner, that's been starving for an opportunity to have the opportunity, I think, to just go into, I think, a season with actual optimism, a season with actual, momentum to build on. And so I think overall, I think you have to be pleased with an 8-5 season. You have to be pleased with a bowl victory, the first bowl victory for this program since 2019. So I think on its surface, that needs to be celebrated. I think as I transition into the 2026 season, and again, I know we're hours after the 2025 season ended, so it's tough to say. We really don't know who's actually coming back. There are guys that have already declared and will be transferring, but there's still guys that probably will announce that they're going to transfer that we haven't heard yet. So I obviously don't really know what the roster is going to look like at this point, but I think in general we have to be honest about what we're watching, for Louisiana Tech. And again, I mentioned it before that it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's not clean. It's not pretty football. But Louisiana Tech did finish the season 8-5, and they did finish with their first winning season since 2019, their most wins since 2019, and their first bowl victory since 2019. That is real momentum. And I understand that Louisiana Tech's offense, it really gets in its own way at times. It takes forever for the unit to wake up, it feels like. But I do feel like if they can restock that running back room, if they can restock the wide receiver room for this team and really find playmakers. I've heard about all offseason about how this passing game and the playmakers that we have. Like, guess what? You're one of I think one of 3 teams in the country that has less than 8 passing touchdowns in 2025. So like you have to find an ability to be multiple offensively. And again, I don't know if necessarily that means in the offseason you need to go find a veteran quarterback, that can pass the ball effectively and kind of get back to maybe that dual quarterback system that we saw earlier in the year. Maybe you go that route, or maybe they just really focus with Trey. Like, Trey, we know what you can do with the ball in your hands as a runner, but we got to make you a more efficient passer. We have to figure out ways to get you easy completions. We got to figure out ways to get Eli Finley, Marlon Jackson, whoever is going to be back in that receiving room. We have to figure out ways to be multiple. I mean, again, you saw it when Louisiana Tech was struggling. Like, teams are just going to put 7 to 8 people in the box and basically dare you to throw the football. And obviously Louisiana Tech was able to complete a couple long passes, in the second half. But like, for the most part, when you decide that you're going to just run, you're just going to be an option team, you have to recognize that there are going to be times where your offense is not productive. And if that's the team you want to be, that's fine, but you have to run the risk of not being productive. You have to run the risk of teams knowing how to shut you down. So I think that's probably one of my biggest questions going into the offseason is, does this offensive identity change, or do they just double down and say, like, we're going to be an even more run-heavy team. We're going to continue to go quarterback power. We're going to restock that running back room. We're going to figure out a new starting combination on the offensive line. Like, those are questions that they're going to have to answer. But I think that's probably number one. It's not aesthetically pleasing at times to watch, but at the same time, like they really found over the last month and certainly over the last 3 games of the season with a 3-game win streak, like they certainly found an ability to win games, I think, in spite of and because of their offense at times, which is certainly not something you could say, I think, most of the Sonny Cumbie era about this offense. So that's probably my biggest takeaway, I think, as far as moving into the offseason. Obviously, another big talking point is going to be this team is moving into the Sun Belt. You're 2-0 against the Sun Belt this year. Obviously, you lost to South Alabama early in Sonny Cumbie's tenure as Sun Belt team, but obviously the relevancy of winning 2 Sun Belt, matchups this year, I think it certainly bodes well. I think it's one of those things where I think Louisiana Tech, even before this season, and we heard the news about the Sun Belt, I felt like just competitively, roster-wise and just, obviously regionally, I thought Louisiana Tech was going to be a great fit for the Sun Belt. I think you have to be very encouraged if you're a Louisiana Tech fan that the fact that you've beaten 2 Sun Belt teams this year. Now, granted, both of these teams were not like cream of the crop, like the greatest teams in the Sun Belt, not by any means. Obviously, Troy, James Madison, you could throw a couple others in there. But, certainly Southern Miss, obviously won 7 games. They made a bowl game. Obviously, Coastal Carolina made a bowl game too. So, there certainly were productive wins to be had. But I think overall, I think you have to be pleased at the fact that Louisiana Tech is 2-0 in the Sun Belt. And you go into the new league with optimism. And you can say, we can compete with the teams in this league. So that's number 2. I think the last thing that we really don't know at this point, but really, I think the last takeaway that I have is what was real about this season. And I know it can sound pessimistic to say that, but again, this is a bottom line business. This is a season where your coaching staff came in on the hot seat. Obviously, your head coach going into 2026 is entering the final year of his current contract. There is still pressure to be had with this program. I think it's interesting when you look at the 2025 season, let's look at what happened. Okay, you lead the country with 7 defensive touchdowns. You finish top 3 nationally in interceptions. You cannot take away those 2 stats and say Louisiana Tech season would have been the same. Absolutely not. And I think that's where I'm going to kind of hit on, I don't know necessarily if what happened this year is sustainable. I don't know if necessarily Louisiana Tech can say, Sonny Cumbie talked about it in post-game, that this is going to be a springboard into a new era, obviously a new era going into the Sun Belt for this team. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think, obviously takeaways are not luck. You have to be in the right position. You have to make the plays. But they are, in a way, they are in flux. You're not necessarily going to get the same amount of turnover production year to year. I was looking since 2021 when the NIL era began and obviously all this transfer portal madness began, when rosters are in flux. The top 3 teams nationally since 2021, each season, that finished top 3 nationally in interceptions, the following season, those teams did not finish in the top 20 in interceptions. And so I think it's one of those things where if you're a Louisiana Tech fan, you have to be pleased with what took place this year. You'll take the 8 wins, you'll take the defensive success and the takeaway history. But at the same time, you're not going to have, I think, those opportunities again next year. You're not going to have the opportunity to score the defensive touchdowns that you did. And so I think it's unlikely to say that Louisiana Tech is going to be able to win games like they did this year again next year. You have to be better offensively. You have to be more sustainable as a defense. I praise them for the defensive takeaways that they had this year. Your entire starting secondary objectively will not be back next year. And so that's a question that you're going to have to solve as a defense is are we going to be that sold out again about taking the football away? Or are we going to get back to maybe being a stronger run defense, continue to be a strong red zone defense, and just get off the field more? I think that's a question that you're going to have because your playmakers on the defensive backfield are gone. The guys that made the game-changing plays for you this year are leaving. And so, again, I think if you're a Louisiana Tech fan, you have to be honest and say, what was really sustainable about this season, and can we actually carry that over into 2026? I think defensively, that's a huge question mark, and I'm not sure it's possible. Offensively, again, I think if you can restock that running back room, if you can give Trey Kukuk some real weapons, and if he can develop as a quarterback, and frankly, I think he has some real competition threatening him, I think this offense can be good. I think you saw it found an identity over the last month, but again, like the sustainability of it, we clearly saw tonight and throughout the season. Like they get in their own way and they just wait to wake up and perform and execute. And obviously, they've been able to win most of these games, but then there were times this year where they left so much on the table. Like again, they should have won that LSU game. They should have won the Delaware game, but obviously they didn't because they failed in execution late. So it's one of those things where it's a great season. You have to celebrate it. Obviously, for the players, an incredible accomplishment. 8 wins and a bowl win is certainly nothing to hang your nose up at. But again, when you're talking about a coaching staff and a program that really needs to continue to build on this momentum and still has pressure on itself entering 2026, you have to be honest of like what is sustainable about what took place this year. And again, I think the defensive takeaways I don't think are sustainable, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this team can't win games next year. I think you just have to be realistic and say we have to find different ways to win. I think it would be a mistake to go into 2026 and say like, oh yeah, we're gonna take the football away at a high rate. You know, we're gonna win the way we won this year. It wasn't sustainable. I think you just had a lot of bounces really finally go your way that they didn't go the first 3 years of this coaching staff's tenure. And I think if that continues, you obviously can be back in this position again next year. But I think it would be a mistake to just say, yeah, we're not going to change anything. We're just going to be back in this position next year. Let's just run it back. I don't agree with that philosophy, and we'll see because I think you're going to have a much tougher schedule next year, certainly in non-conference play, but obviously in conference play as well. So there are obviously a lot of things on my mind, and certainly for Louisiana Tech fans, I'm sure there are as well. So, but bottom line is Louisiana Tech is 8-5, and they win a bowl game for the first time since 2019. Something certainly to celebrate, and we can have plenty of offseason conversations on the radio and podcasts and whatever else moving forward. But for now, again, Louisiana Tech wins the Radiance Technologies Independence Bowl 23-14 over Coastal Carolina. That's going to do it for this edition of Tech and Tan and for this 2025 season. I appreciate everyone for following along and listening, and thanks again. Have a good one.